Hello and welcome to Live with Marketers, our award-winning LinkedIn Live broadcast series exploring industry trends and future forward views of the marketing landscape with some of the brightest marketers in the B2B arena. I'm your host, Alex Rinn, and I'm a senior content marketing manager at LinkedIn, and I'm delighted to be broadcasting to you today from sunny Los Angeles. Thank you so much for taking the time to join today. I'm very excited about today's episode. We're here to talk about the Great Reshuffle and specifically its impact on marketing departments. So hundreds of thousands of marketers have left their jobs in 2021 in search of more flexibility and a sense of real purpose. The global phenomenon has become known as the Great Reshuffle, and it's dramatically reshaping employee expectations, and employers are feeling the pressure to keep up with these expectations or risk losing their best employees. We have an amazing team here today to share our LinkedIn original research that will help give us some insight and guidance into the topic. Our guests this time around are Takia Burt and Connie Chen. Takia is the editor-in-chief of the LinkedIn Marketing Solutions blog. Connie is on the Insights team as a program manager. Quickly, before we get into intros, I just wanted to tell everyone that at the end, we'll leave around like 5 to 10 minutes for questions. So please feel free to submit them as they come up, as we're running through the content. So, right, Takia, Connie, I would love for you both to introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about what you do, and as is tradition, share something that's not on your LinkedIn profile. So Takia, we can begin with you.
Hi, Alex. It's always a delight to see you. I'm Takia Burt, and I'm coming to you from chilly Chicago, not sunny California. And I am the editor-in-chief of our LinkedIn Marketing Solutions blog. And I work very often with Connie Chen to produce the kinds of reports that we're going to be talking about today.
Awesome. And what was something that's not on your LinkedIn? Do you want to tell them about your garden?
Oh, that's right. Yes. Yes. Of course, I want to tell them about my garden. So the one thing that's not on my LinkedIn profile is that I am an avid gardener. I was looking at the list of things that I'm growing this year, and I think it was a list that had over almost 40 things, 40 different vegetables that I'm planting. So I have a big summer ahead of me, and I am looking forward to it.
Yeah, and she's being modest. She actually has her own award-winning gardening blog. So we'll have to drop that in the chat later. Connie, over to you.
Thanks, Alex. I'm so excited to be here again. So I am a program manager on our Marketing Solutions Insights team. I manage our thought leadership and narrative programs. That's my cat in the background right there. I work really closely with Takia and her team to bring LinkedIn's first-party marketing data to our members through several different external channels, including this show. I'm trying to think of one that I did not say last year, but this is related. I wanted to be an artist growing up. I wanted to go to art school really bad. Unfortunately, my parents told me I had to pick something more practical. But I actually did end up pursuing graphic design for a year after I graduated. So yeah, that's my fun fact.
I love that. And another fun fact was that you have a cat. I love that the cat just made a cameo.
I know, he decided to say, or she decided to say hello.
Love it. Okay, so yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. And I obviously enjoy working with you guys very much. So the poll question that I have for the audience, just to kick it back real quick, is have you made a career shift in the last 2 years? And the answers are either A, yes, B, no, and I don't plan to, or C, not yet. And we will wait a couple seconds to give you a chance to respond. We're just trying to figure out how many folks here have also been a part of the Great Reshuffle, or where your mindset is with that. And what do you guys think, just based on your research, Connie and Takia, like what do you think we're going to get the most of based on our audience?
I think it's going to be either A or C. I mean, technically, I also did a career transition. I was an analyst before, but then last August switched over to this role. But I guess if we're counting internal as well, I'm going to go with A or C.
Yeah, I totally agree, Connie. I as well had a career change, and it's
It's
been just
true.
over 2 years now that I've been working at LinkedIn. So, right as the pandemic began, I began working here. So, I also think that it's going to be A or C.
Okay. All right. So in first place, we have yes. In second, we have not yet, and then 3, no, don't plan to. So there's a lot of movement, which is great to hear. It also supports the research that you guys did. And speaking of the research, before we dive in, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about the methodology of the report. I know it was LinkedIn first party data. I think there's a couple of other sources that we dove into, but would love to hear more about how you gathered that info.
Yeah, so the majority of our report was LinkedIn first party data. We looked at people within the marketing function over the course of 2021. And then we supplemented our women in marketing report with the ANA diversity report and the McKinsey Lean In Women in the Workplace report.
Awesome. And just so everyone knows, the link should be at the bottom if the team doesn't mind showing it up right now. Perfect. That link houses all the information that we're going to talk about today. And if you want to have like a deep dive on any of those topics, feel free to visit that link. It has all of it, also designed really nicely into beautiful infographics that Takia worked on. So let's jump into the topic. We've obviously seen a huge turnover in marketing recently with 31% growth in marketers changing jobs. That's over 600,000 marketers in 2021. What did the research show why that is? What is driving the change? And let's see, Connie, let's start with you.
Yeah, like we said the last time we were on this show, the pandemic has really accelerated a lot of business and especially in the digital transformation area. And a big part of that was getting people to work virtually at the same capacity that they were working in person. And so now that we've been in the pandemic for almost 2, 3 years, and we're kind of coming out of those restrictions and going back into regular life before the pandemic, people have become accustomed to working remotely and having a little bit more flexibility in their day. And then on top of that, because it's been 3 years, people have had a lot of life changes during the pandemic. So now that companies are making decisions about whether they want to continue having people work from home or ask them to come back into the office or maybe a hybrid of the two, people are really starting to sit down and think about what do they want, what job might line up with where they're currently at in their life, given all the changes that have happened so far. And the pandemic also removed a lot of those ancillary perks of a job, like free food, snacks, happy hours, cool workplaces, cool coworkers to talk to, have small talk with. And so a lot of people were focused and forced to focus on their core job. So they really had to make a decision and think about, do I really want to do this job? Do I like this job? Am I happy here? Do I want more or do I want something different? And so I think that was a big driving factor in why we saw such a big amount of change in terms of people within marketing moving.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, just for me personally, like we moved to LA, LinkedIn said that we could work wherever we wanted to, which is amazing. I do miss talking to my coworkers. I do miss the amazing food because I don't know how to cook for myself, but it's a work in progress. So yeah, all of those make sense. Takia.
Well, I think that the thing that, our report showed is that employees are increasingly unhappy, right? And as employees have grown unhappier, they've had more time at home to sort of think about the things that they're missing out on life in. And so I think, as Connie has said, people are making some very fundamental sort of changes in their career, whether that means taking another job that's sort of on a lateral level, or whether that means leaving your company entirely. I think that there are a lot of reasons. And for women and people of color in particular, I think the rise of this flexible work environment. And I think at this point, I think it's 87% of employees, our research has found, that want to remain remote most of the time. And most of those people are women and people of color. And I think that sort of goes around the fact that a lot of times women and people of color, experience fewer microaggressions when they're not in the office. They also have more ability to manage their household duties and cope with work stressors. So I think that people are just making fundamental changes in their career choices right now.
Yeah, we've had a lot of time to ourselves, a lot of time to look in the mirror and just decide what is truly, truly important. And that all makes sense. I've also read some articles recently that talk about like the danger of remote work, and if we're giving employees too much freedom. So that leads me into our first segment called Trend or Dead End. And essentially, I love the little graphic. Essentially, what it is we're talking about remote work. There's some ideas about employees definitely need to go back to the office. Then there's other companies that like LinkedIn that have put a lot of trust into their employees saying you can work from wherever you want as long as you're performing well. So let's talk about what the perceived pros and cons are. And is this like a fad, or is life just gonna bounce back to how it was before in the pre-pandemic era? Connie, I'll start with you first.
Yeah, I think that we can't undo the pandemic, right? It's a fact. We've lived this way for 3 years. It's forced all of us to come to terms with what we really want. And it's also not something that people forget easily. You can't really unsee or unlearn all the things that you've thought or done in the last 3 years. And because of that, our work has fundamentally changed and been disrupted. And the pandemic was an accelerator for remote work in particular. And what a lot of people found is that they work really well remote. They're actually way more efficient when they're remote. And so I think one of the pros to allowing your employees that choice of working from home is that you get some people who are going to do their job better. They're going to be happier doing their jobs, and they're going to be more motivated to do them. My thought is that it's not an either or, it's a hybrid, because there are some people, quite honestly, that do love being in the office, do love interacting with their coworkers, and are more extroverted in that sense, and feel more feel more motivated and efficient at their job when they are in the office. Allow those employees that space to return, but I think if you force everybody to come back in, you're going to lose those valuable workers that do a much better job when they are remote.
I think that one of the big challenges actually, because in marketing, perhaps even more particularly, because remote work has risen even more dramatically in the marketing industry than it has in other industry, is that, when employers do implement more flexible work options, 32% of those people working at those companies were more likely to struggle with work-life balance than their peers at other organizations. So I think that in this field where remote work is more common than in other fields, there should be an emphasis on improving work-life balance to keep employees happy and productive. And I think this is something that both employers and employees need to be talking about, because while companies kind of should be proactive in developing these programs and resources to help remote employees to kind of set boundaries between, don't work at 6:30 at night, don't work don't work weekends, turn yourself off. It's sort of also important for employees to communicate what they need and to work with their employees to help them kind of strike this balance effectively. The other thing I think kind of we need to watch out for is people of color and women are much more likely than white men, for example, to want to work remotely. And they continue to embrace flexibility as a means to kind of advance their careers. Also, maybe they experience fewer microaggressions in the office, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later in the program, I think. But brands should sort of start weighing kind of proximity bias, because white men are probably the most likely to go into the office. That sort of may lead to inequities between remote and in-office employees, and that may actually cause more inequities along racial and gender lines.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Let's talk a little bit more about the top motivators people say for changing jobs and attraction and retention with talent and importance of employer brand and that kind of stuff. So when it comes to attracting and retaining marketing talent, what did your research say about the key challenges employers face, will likely face in the coming years? What should employers look out for? And what are marketers saying that they care about most right now?
Do you want me to? I can take that.
Yeah, whoever, yeah, go ahead, kick it off. Yeah.
I can. So basically, we found that there are 3 factors that are sort of most frequently motivating job changes for people, and that's work-life balance, compensation, and company culture. So, you know, in order to both attract and retain their employees, companies should be focusing on all 3 of those things and sort of really thinking at a basic level, what does my company stand for? Because another thing that people are kind of wanting right now is a more purpose-filled work environment. I do think that companies should be focusing a bit more on retention right now to keep the great talent that they have, because you never know, the best talent you have may be at your own organizations. So I think that for companies who want to retain talent, you should consider how your company and culture supports internal mobility. So are you proactively helping your employees learn new skills? Do you provide career and leadership development? Do you have an internal recruitment marketing strategy in place? So these are all things I think that companies should be thinking about right now in this environment.
Yeah, and I think having kind of like a work path available to the employees that have been there for like a longer time is definitely important. Reinvesting in the people that have invested in you for so long. And
Right.
also, like, we know in tech that people talk. So people are very open about their experiences at their company. If you treat your employees well, they're kind of doing your employer branding for you in a sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Funny. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to that actually. One, I think, very tactical step that companies could take in order to keep the people at the company that are doing a really good job is focus on your managers. Train your managers to be able to gather that feedback from their teams to understand what's going well right now and maybe what's something that needs to change in order for employees to feel more for feel like their wellness is being supported while they're working during this environment. And also, so you understand how you as a company can pivot to kind of keep up with this changing landscape. What we found was that actually 85% of employees say their manager supports their well being directly. And that's 2 times more than senior leadership. So management plays a huge role in an employee's well-being. And then we also found, to your point, Alex, that if an employee feels like they're being supported, they're actually over 3 times more likely to recommend the company to a friend or someone else to work at. So if you treat your current employees well, you build up the culture, you gather feedback, you make sure that your employees feel heard and feel supported while you roll out these new flexible work policies. It's going to boost your employer brand overall, and they're going to be part of the marketing for you, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick reminder, please submit your questions along the way. We will get to as many as we can at the end. One of the areas of your research that was a little more like startling, I guess, and less understandable was the rate at which women didn't see professional advancement during the pandemic. And I guess since the start of the pandemic, 66% of women haven't received a raise and 79% of women haven't been promoted. So what can you share about just what your survey said about how women are responding to this in the context of the Great Shuffle and why we think this might be happening? And Connie, I'll pass it to you first.
Yeah, so we actually saw that 36% more women left marketing jobs than men. So I think that kind of matches up with what you just said, Alex, about how they're not feeling supported, they're not feeling valued in their workplace, and so they're seeking that elsewhere. and they're going where they might be more appreciated. We also found that female marketers apply to 4 more jobs on average than a male marketer in the last year, and they were actually more likely to be promoted after doing so and moving to another job. So they they benefit the most from the Great Reshuffle, and we're seeing that marketers are in demand too. I mean, we saw, I think, over 370% increase in marketing job postings in 2021 compared to the year before. So there's no shortage of marketing jobs out there for women, and I think women understand that and they see that. And so if they're not feeling supported in the workplace and they voice their concern, and they don't feel there's enough action behind it, they will move, and I think it's benefits them to do so. Takia also mentioned there that women and women of color, they benefit the most from flexible work and working from home because they're less likely to experience microaggressions, and that is something that I think companies should really be taking in consideration when they're putting together these hybrid or flexible work policies, because you want to continue to retain and attract a diverse workforce in order for your business to be successful, for your employees to feel valued and cared for. And I think it's really important in that process to be able to uplift and motivate women.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we should recognize too, that while women aren't getting promoted at the same rate as men, which is terrible, that we still aren't getting paid what we're worth. But, women are sort of in marketing at least. And this is actually a good thing about marketing that we don't see in other industries. But women, the leadership in marketing, women are actually very well represented. And our data showed that women are successfully kind of scaling the ladder when it comes to marketing leadership jobs. And they account for 53% of manager level or higher positions, which is great news. And we also sort of looked into the CMO position, and we used some ANA research that found that 55% of all CMOs are women. So when it comes to leadership in marketing in particular, because this is very much not the case in other fields, women are doing well when it comes to leadership, even if we aren't getting paid, in the same rate. The other thing that I think we need to realize too is that this, and we talked a little bit about this in our last report, but this is a trend that mostly white women are experiencing, and that women of color are left out of, because according to the ANA's report, of women who are CMOs, just 4% are Latina, 5% are Black women, and 6% are Asian women. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done when it comes to these issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think across industries, women of color continue to have worse experiences at work, including challenges to competence and disrespectful working behavior. We talked about microaggressions. According to our LinkedIn's B2BI Institute, though most white employees consider themselves allies, far fewer take key allyship actions, creating kind of like a knowledge action gap. So what do you think, for the people that are watching, like what actions do you think, I guess it's two-part, like what actions do you think white employees can take to support their Black colleagues? And especially for like the leadership that's white and male, like how can they go about having meaningful conversations about microaggressions that will actually cause change?
Yeah, I mean, I think that first of all, I'm glad you referenced the B2BI research. It's something that we included in our report. But one of the things that we've been doing for years and years is sort of focusing on the business case for why diversity is good for business. There's been tons of research that says, hiring more women and hiring more people of color will lead to greater profitability. It will lead to a culture that is more inclusive, that attracts better talent. So we have all this evidence and we talk about it a lot, but it hasn't done that much to move the needle, as you can, see when I cited the research figures for women in leadership roles. So we still have a huge problem in marketing and in other industries when it comes to diversity in leadership and being in, creating inclusive cultures in which people of color can thrive. And the good thing about the B2B eyes research is that it did give us a path forward. They said that, one of the ways that we can work toward making a more equitable work environment is to talk about why it's right. Instead of focusing sort of on the business case, we talk morally, right? Why it's right to, have a more equitable leadership, why it's right to have a more inclusive environment for employees. So I think that the more that brands can sort of take these opportunities to talk about, why it's important, not just that it's going to be good for business, but that your, coworker that you spend time with will be, what I mean, who may have experienced microaggressions and racism can benefit this. So, I think the more we can sort of make it personal for people, the more people will care.
Yeah, because I agree. I think there's a lot more awareness around it than there has been before. And that's great because awareness is obviously the first step, but there needs to be a lot more ownership of talking about it and not just thinking like, oh, well, it's the CMO's job or it's the CEO's job. Like, obviously they should be setting the tone, but I think that a lot of it is like an issue of ownership. And then also just people like not wanting to say the wrong thing. But that shouldn't.
Yeah, I think another thing that, people can do, marketing managers who are in charge of hiring, if you have a good Black candidate, hire and they're qualified for the job, hire that candidate. If you have a good Latina who's up for promotion, help that, within your organization, give that person the opportunity and the resources to advance.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's a lot of things that not just your coworkers can be doing, but that, companies can be doing to encourage this kind of environment.
Yeah.
There's also a lot that marketers can do at these companies as well. So I think while it's really important to be able to establish that type of language and culture within the company to uplift the people, women of color within the company and promote them into leadership positions and continue to be allies for them, you also have to communicate that message outward to the people that may want to work at your company or are looking for jobs at your company. And the language case that Takia is talking about is applicable there as well. Using that transformational language instead of the business case is really going to make an impact with people of color who are looking to apply to your company, who are trying to prioritize working in a diverse environment. So I think when you're a marketer and you're working at these companies, really thinking about your holistic brand. When you're thinking about your branding campaigns, not only are you branding for your products, but you're also branding for the company and what your company stands for. And so that's a really key part of your marketing strategy that you should be taking into account in order to, I think, really drive the message home in the market of what your company stands for and what they care about and your company culture.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think, just changing gears a little bit, I wanted to share, I know your research shared more specifically from LinkedIn data, the top skills that are in demand right now and the top, I think it's titles or just occupations. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Connie, I'll give it to you first.
Yeah, so we're seeing actually for skills. So last year we saw that marketers were putting a lot of time and effort into upskilling themselves, and we're seeing no less this past year. In fact, we're seeing that marketers are doing a little bit of upskilling within the more soft skill area. They're looking at things like presenting to C-level, teams, and they're also looking at hard skills as well, like social media management and go-to-market strategy. And so I think what that's telling me is marketing has now become more of a balance between a technical job and a job that needs a lot of soft skills and creativity. So we're seeing a lot of that there. Yeah, and I think what companies can do in that area, knowing what you see about marketers trying to upskill themselves, is that focusing on your current workforce and who's working for you right now, put in those resources to encourage your teams to upskill, give them help them with the training that they need in order to become more valuable in the marketplace, but also just more valuable to you and your brand and your company.
Great. Gary, are you going to make it over there? I'm concerned.
Sorry, I need water. It's like, I'm like, where can I find water when I'm on this? I'm like, sorry. It's
no. I just want to make sure you're okay.
We're all struggling here.
I'm bananas right now as well, so
I'm like trying to hold it in.
No, it's all good. Let it out. This is a safe place.
Awesome. Thank you, Connie, for that. The thing that I sort of also wanted to bring up too, when it came to skills, interestingly, our research showed that fewer than 1/3 of workers who changed jobs in the past year did so, got a rise in seniority, right? People like job seekers in marketing aren't necessarily looking for a promotion when they switch their jobs, which suggests that kind of marketers are looking for new challenges and that moving up isn't everything. So I think considering that, sort of taking lateral steps to experience kind of new roles and specializations within marketing, and upskilling can sort of help you do that, can be kind of very valuable and fulfilling for a lot of people right now.
Yeah. I completely agree that I've talked so much about brand purpose on this show over the past year because it's really taken center stage. And for everyone who doesn't know, I actually had Takia and Connie on last year because this is an annual report that they just started doing. This is the second annual one. And yeah, it's just so interesting. I mean, it's not even about like the titles anymore or even about the money. It's more about like the freedom of time, like just being able to manage your own time. So anyway, it's an interesting shift. I want to talk about, I know that you guys also did like a slice of the report that talked about how this data was different by region.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you could share a little bit about what you saw in that? Whoever wants to go first, Takia, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. One of the things that was kind of interesting is that I'm trying to remember what it was. I think it was in like people in APAC were more likely, and that's the Asia Pacific region, were more likely to switch jobs. But when they switched jobs, they were also less likely to get promotions and, job promotions, which is terrible for people, which is terrible for people in APAC. But in NAMER, which is North America, and then EMEA, which is Europe, and Middle East and Africa. Generally, when people moved around to different jobs, they were able to get promotions, get raises, unlike their colleagues or cohorts in APAC right now. The other thing that was interesting in that, and our sort of slice of data report, is that I'm sorry, I totally had a brain thing. So Connie, you talk about this right now.
I found it interesting that NAMER had the largest growth in remote job share compared to the other two regions. I mean, the other regions grew as well, but it seems like NAMER really had the biggest digital transformation when it came to that area. So I thought that was interesting. And I think that could potentially just be due to the fact that a lot of tech, like its headquarters are here. A lot of companies that are able to work remotely are here. And so because of that, we've seen a lot more of those industries go remote. But yeah, I found that really interesting. I also think just in terms of access to tools to work remotely, NAMER's probably just higher than the other regions in general. And we just have we have a pretty large workforce that does have access to those. So I think that could also explain it. But I thought that was really interesting. In terms of like skills or occupations that were different across all of the regions, what I found really interesting was that in NAMER and EMEA, the top occupations were a little bit more management focused versus in APAC, they were a little bit more specialist focused. So I think that's an interesting thing to see. And I think it kind of does support what a lot of big tech companies do in terms of the outsourcing some of those specialist roles to APAC. So I think that our data does support that as well.
One of the interesting things too that I always, whenever I'm given an opportunity, is to sort of point out salary differences. I definitely do. And one of the things I found interesting were the regions that you got paid the most, you know, in marketing. And so I'm going to tell you right now what they are, so that all marketers listening to this can go apply for jobs in Seattle, San Francisco, Atlanta, and surprisingly, Greater Fayetteville, Arkansas, and the Greater Minneapolis-St. Paul area in North America, in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. The Randstad, Netherlands is the #1 place where you get paid the most money. The Greater Reading area is #2. Greater Munich metropolitan area is 3. Greater Toulouse metropolitan area is 4. And Greater Nancy area is 5. For APAC, you want to move to Tokyo. Yeah. Sydney.
I want to move to Tokyo.
Right? Don't we all? Kuala Lumpur, Melbourne, all good places to move. So again, marketers, if you're looking to boost your salaries, those are the places you want to be.
Yeah. But if you want to move to San Francisco, just be prepared to give 50% of your paycheck to your rent.
You should definitely be considering, you know, the cost of living in these places. And maybe Arkansas is the place you want to move.
Maybe. That's interesting data. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I want to make sure that we have enough time for questions. So let's wrap on some final thoughts. So obviously employers are getting a very clear message that marketers value their flexibility in their schedules. They want a supportive culture, especially for women, better compensation, and companies are willing to hear this message and learn its lessons. If they're able to learn the lessons, I think they'll have great luck in hiring the best talent that's out there. And those that don't listen to what's happening right now in the marketplace are going to lose the best marketers they have, and their brand is going to suffer, because people don't buy from brands, people buy from people. So just remember that. Yeah. Let's wrap on some final thoughts. So just some key high-level takeaways for marketers in the coming year. Connie, I'll pass it to you first.
Yeah. So my key takeaway from this, I think this is applicable for brands as well as marketers who are working for a brand. Think about your brand and what it stands for. People now care more than ever, and you're much more. The decisions that you make are much more public than they are because of social media. And so be intentional about that messaging outward about your culture and your values and your DEI initiatives, and be intentional also about promoting it and supporting it internally. And utilize your marketing teams and your marketers to tell that story externally, so that people who want to work for your company or work with your company feel that they feel aligned to your values, as well as potentially the products or the jobs that you're offering them.
I think that right now it is an exciting time, actually, filled with opportunity for both employers and their employee and, you know, job seekers. And I think a lot of times people, say people are quitting their jobs and there's a great resignation, and brands, there's a lot of fear associated with that. But right now the talent pool is immense, and you can get really good people to come work with you. It also sort of gives you an opportunity to focus on sort of really fundamental questions about your brand, and refining, what that means to you and what that means to your employees. So I think that, right now is a time that's exciting for people, where there are lots of opportunities. And, at the same time, while this is true, it's also a time of sort of big change, and I think new challenges. For example, the rise of remote work. There may be challenges that come with that brands have not had to think about before, and employees have not had to think about before. when we talk about making it a more inclusive culture, that's not an easy thing to do. That is a very difficult thing to do, both for employers and employees. And it's something that we have to be committed to doing in order for those sort of programs to succeed. So, this is a time of great opportunity, excitement. However, you have to make sure basically that the number one thing that you should sort of be remembering right now is that you have to create an environment in which your employees can thrive. And I think brands should be seeing that as an opportunity.
Absolutely. Those are amazing takeaways. I'm so inspired by both of you guys, and I love this report. And I hope that we continue to do it every year. I am going to go ahead and move to Q&A just for the sake of time. And the survey that we have should be live right now. So if you don't mind just letting us know how we did. We always want to be tackling topics that are most important to you and helping you solve your pain points in marketing. So please just let us know. And if there's any topics you'd like to see in the future, that would also be great. Hey, Lee's on the line. Lee said, great point, Takia. These times are a great opportunity for employees and employees alike. Love that. Okay, so our first question comes from Tia, who's also a big Takia fan. She's been hyping you up the entire time in the chat. So her question is, how has the Great Reshuffle affected neurodivergent and disabled employees?
I would love to know. I don't know, because one of the challenges with our data is that we don't collect data around identity. So we can't really segment our data to tell you this, but I wish I knew. I wish I could tell you, because that is a very interesting thing. And I do know that in the McKinsey report that we looked at, disabled people and neurodivergent people also were among the people who experienced the most microaggressions and the biggest challenges at work. So I'm guessing that it's actually probably a great time for employers to be prioritizing these groups of people to help kind of attract and retain that talent, because it is sort of an area that's often overlooked. So thanks for the question. That's a great question.
And that's one of the things that, like, the talent pool has become very accessible and large now, because you just, if you're doing remote work, you don't have to hire someone that lives right by you. And whatever someone's capabilities are in terms of disabilities, it might be better for them to work from home, and then they have an opportunity to work for a company. So again, I wish that we had that kind of data, but we don't. But I'll look into that for you, Tia, because that's very interesting. I'll do some Googling.
That's a great question.
Yeah, maybe that's something we supplement in our report next year.
Yeah,
you're giving us all kinds of good ideas.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question is, we talked a lot, obviously, about companies that companies should have great cultures. So do you have some examples of companies that are doing it right, that you think have really great cultures, like from the inside out?
I think LinkedIn has a great culture.
I was gonna say, I don't want to be biased, but
I know, right? I mean, but it's the truth. And I actually really feel very strongly about this, but I've never worked for a company like this before that actually talks about how to be more inclusive and prioritizes wellness. We get wellness days off, we get the benefits for seeking help if you need help. If you are having any sort of mental health crisis, it's just amazing. We have the ERGs that we have to represent different sort of underrepresented populations at the company. Great. So, I mean, I think actually, and I'm not trying to be biased either, but I think LinkedIn is a great example of how a brand can champion all of these qualities and actually do the hard work of, actualizing them.
Yeah, we also do a lot of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. Yeah. So I was actually going to chime in and say, while I've been working at LinkedIn for 4 years, I can't help but be biased either. But 2 days ago, Takia and I did a Twitter Spaces chat, and one of the participants chimed in. Her name was Rakia Reynolds, and she founded Sky Blue Media. And so she actually mentioned that during the pandemic, she noticed that a lot of her employees are getting burned out. And so to help with the burnout, they actually employed a full-time a psychologist, I believe, to help offer free therapy sessions for her employees, and that drastically improved the well-being and happiness of her employees. So I thought that was really moving. I know that therapy is not something that's accessible to everybody. So to be able to employ a psychologist to help your employees manage their mental, emotional, and physical workload, I think is really huge. So that's something I think would be really great for more companies to implement for their culture.
That was fantastic. And just to note, Rakia Reynolds was actually one of our top marketers to watch last year. And she has a great interview with all sorts of nuggets, good gems, that you can find on our platform, on our blog. So I don't have the link offhand right now, but Rakia Reynolds is fantastic and definitely somebody that you can look to for sort of inspiration and great advice.
Yeah, and I think it's a great example also of listening to your employee base, asking for feedback and listening to the hard feedback that comes back to you, because no company is perfect and we always have things to improve. And I think that was just a great example of taking the feedback and putting it into action very quickly and very effectively.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. We have here, I think it's on a quarterly basis, our Glint surveys. So just getting the pulse of like how employees are feeling, how are you feeling at work, how are you doing, how are you feeling about your manager? Like, I think it's at least once a quarter, if not twice a quarter now, that the company is checking in on us and trying to make changes to help. So if you're not doing that, I think if you're looking to improve your employer brand, it's healing from the inside out. So it would be starting with those surveys internally.
Yeah.
Next question is actually, it's funny because we were just talking about one of the top women in marketing to follow, but do you have any other recommendations of top women in marketing to follow?
Oh my God. Now I wish I had another link.
We can include these all in the
recommendations for women in marketing. In fact, I have a list of 25 women in marketing to watch man, I can't, there's so many. Oh my God. We have one actually now working at LinkedIn named Gail Moody Bird, who I put on this list before she started working at LinkedIn. Now she is the VP of marketing for our LinkedIn sales solution. Lola Bakari, who's going to be on Live with Marketers.
Gonna say, so Lola Bakari, she's one of the top LinkedIn voices of 2022. And she's also like a CMO whisperer and just like inclusive marketing strategist. Right. So that's like a given title. I don't know. She is a CMO whisperer. But anyway, I'm really excited. I'm going to have her on. We'll talk about that in a sec. But I'm going to have her on next month, and we're going to talk about how to create inclusive marketing moments. So kind of a good add-on to our conversation today.
Yeah, I wish I had this link to share with you guys. But go to our blog and just look up Inspirational Black Women, and you should find it. There's an entire good list.
Okay. Good stuff. Okay. Final question. And then we're about to run out of time. So final question, as a white male manager, how can I be more inclusive in the workplace?
Oh, good question.
That's a good question. I would say the first thing you should do is to listen to your employees and give them the space and sort of to tell you things, right? Because I think a lot of times people of color won't say anything if something happens because they don't think people will take them seriously when they raise those kinds of issues. So I think creating an environment where your employees feel comfortable coming to you and telling you those kinds of things is really, really important. I think that also sort of challenging your own assumptions when you think about things will be helpful. And I know that's very kind of vague, but just if, when you're sort of thinking about who would be best for a job or what kind of skills you need to fill this position, or, maybe you don't like somebody's attitude, right? Because culturally it's different than what you're used to, but they're very proficient employees. Maybe you ought to be thinking about ignoring your instincts in those instances.
I'd just like to add too, in certain cultures, it's also, for example, I'm Asian American, my parents are immigrants. I was taught growing up to put my head down and do my work, but in American corporate culture, you're meant to speak out and show your leadership. And so it kind of went directly against what I was taught my entire life growing up. And I think having managers that were allies to me, that were able to understand where my strengths and weaknesses were, have that really honest conversation with me, but also be an ally to me in those big meetings where I did need to get that visibility in order to prove my leadership, was really, really impactful and helpful, and help build my confidence as well. So that would be my big piece of advice, is if you know someone on your team who's maybe a little bit quieter or doesn't really particularly present in the way that you do, first check with them to see if they're okay, but with you calling them out in a meeting, but also make it an intentional point to be like, oh, I think this person has a really good thought on that, or this person's actually working on this project and they're leading it, and I think they'd be a perfect candidate for this particular project or initiative. Calling that out and making sure that you're making space for them to show their leadership, I think, is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've also had the fortune of having a lot of amazing advocates and mentors at LinkedIn and outside of LinkedIn that have helped me as well. I mean, I never thought that I'd have my own talk show on LinkedIn. Like, who does this? So
You do.
Thank you. Okay, so on that note, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for being so engaged and for your time. Thank you, obviously, to Kia and Connie. I love working with both of you. I'll see you both very soon. Thank you for sharing your report.
You're the best, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. And don't forget to join us. We mentioned it before, but the next Live with Marketers session is on May 26th, and it's all about how to create inclusive marketing moments. I have Lola Bakare, who I mentioned, and then Maddie Kulkarni, who's the Global Marketing Director of Sustainability and Impact at PepsiCo. They're both amazing, strong, very intelligent women, and I'm so excited for the next broadcast. It's gonna be great. And with that, thanks everyone for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day. See you next month.